The big operations, those guys are not milking cows. They're sitting with their CPAs behind a spreadsheet crunching numbers. They've got the lowest cost guys milking the cows, the minimum wage guys out there milking the cows. And they've got everything industrial, super efficient, buying large amounts of grain, buying large amounts of this at bargain prices. They have their own trucking companies. They're doing everything very efficiently. And yes, they can produce their milk cheaper than the guy who is actually milking the cows directly himself and doing the things himself, because his cost to break even is higher than minimum wage.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Linley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture. You just heard from Mark McAfee, CEO and founder of Organic Pastures Dairy in Fresno, California, now marketing as Raw Farm USA. Mark spoke to Dave Chapman last fall about the many challenges that face organic dairy farmers across the country.
All right, welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. And my guest today is a farmer friend for some time now, Mark McAfee. Mark, I'm not even sure right now, what's the name of your farm?
Well, we were Organic Pastures Dairy for 20 years, and about a year and a half ago, we changed our name to Raw Farm. Rawfarmusa.com is our website. And it's made a big difference to us to do that, but we can explain all that when we're talking.
Yeah, that's right. I know that you are one of the great public advocates for raw milk in America. And I actually met you as a great advocate for organic dairy farms in America. So you wear a lot of hats, you work with a lot of different organizations. Just a little bit of your personal history. Were you born a dairy farmer? Did you grow up on a dairy farm?
Well, I was the chief slave until I was 13 years old on a small dairy farm.
That's right.
So I learned to feed calves and milk cows when I was very young. But it was part of my life when I started out.
Yeah.
My whole childhood was basically based in music, track, travel, farm. I had four brothers working together, doing things on the farm and welding. My first job out of high school I was a commercial welder up in the mountains, kind of earning some money. And then I saw a guy get hurt really badly, and a helicopter flew in with a nurse and a flight paramedic, and I just totally fell in love with that whole entire idea. So I went off to get my pre-med, and I became a certified paramedic, and I did everything in paramedic medicine you can imagine for 17 years and ran 15,000 paramedic calls, taught paramedic school, I was on a rescue team, worked on a helicopter, I was a recruiter, I was an operations manager, I did all kinds of stuff in management as well as precepting and educating in pre-hospital acute care medicine. So that was kind of my previous chapter in life. And then in 1996, my grandparents passed away. My parents gave us a bunch of ground out here, 1,000 acres of land, and I'd been doing a little hobby farming on the side. And decided, you know what, I'm going to change complete chapters. I'm going to resign from paramedic status. I did it cold turkey and took over the family farming operations. But I did it very intentionally. I wanted to be different. I did not want to be on the commodity roller coaster like my friends had been and my neighbors, and decided to become certified organic. But I also was very intentional. I wanted to be connected directly to people, and I wanted to listen to what people wanted, not necessarily what a processor wanted. And that was very much a formative, seminal decision to do that.
Wow. Okay. So you came into this with your eyes wide open.
I did. I didn't have any preconceived ideas about dairying or anything. In fact, most of the raw milk producers I know in the United States are not dairymen. They were actually, I know one was a helicopter pilot in the Army. I know a veterinarian, a dentist, a PhD biologist who teaches at the university. We've got a realtor. I mean, there's just all kinds of walks of life that have recognized raw milk as a whole, complete, nutrient-dense food that's fantastic for you. But they take it kind of an intellectual interest in it, more than perhaps just producing milk, but they're actually producing a product for people. And that's really an important difference, because if you're just dumping milk out there to be processed, it's an entirely different concept than producing raw milk responsibly with high standards and excellence for human consumption. And that's really a huge shift in terms of mindset that a producer would need to make to produce raw milk for people.
Yeah, that's, I think, a pretty different mindset from what most dairy farms have now. They're, mostly struggling to stay in business. They're desperate, like, how do I pay the bills? And I think that that's right. The connection between the person who's going to drink the milk or eat the cheese or eat the yogurt and the farmer's often lost to the peril of both of them.
Well, that can't be overstated, Dave. That's an observation, but it's really a key component here. A dairyman, maybe 2 or 3 generations doing this. It's in his blood. It's in his DNA that he sells milk to a truck that comes and gets it and takes it away. And he gets paid for that milk. And he focuses everything on his cows, his feed, his milking, and that's all he does. He doesn't worry about those things down the food chain towards the consumer ever. In fact, the consumer's not even on his mind. He has no idea who he sells to or why or how or their challenges or their concerns. And so that whole realm is just missing in their mind for multiple generations. So we find, I was talking to Kate the other day about what about these 89 dairies that have lost the Danone contracts with Horizon? Wouldn't some of those be interested in producing directly for people, doing raw? And she said, Mark, after thinking about this, a lot of these dairymen don't want to deal with direct sales. They don't want to deal with the investment of the rest of the food chain. It's so complicated, and they just want to produce milk for pasteurization. And I really had to kind of reset my own mind because in my mind, that's all that I've always really loved is people, right? I mean, as a paramedic, what did I do? Go out and touch somebody, make sure they don't die today. And that was kind of what we did. In my mind, it's like that's where the real value is selling to people. So I've had to reset my mind to respect and appreciate and understand that there's other places too in the dairy industry versus just doing raw. And there's places for everybody at the big table of life here in terms of selling because, you're not going to put raw cheese on pizza and cook it. It's just not going to happen. So we have to be able to have multiple different kinds of products, some pasteurized, some not. But I will say there's 7 dairies a day right now being lost in America. 7 dairies a day lost because of overproduction, low compensation, low price against the supply. So you have more supply than demand, and you have about a 2% loss of fluid milk consumption going on right now. And while cheeses and yogurts are doing okay, the fluid milk consumption is actually in decline. And where are people going? They're going to oat milk, soy milk, no milk, raw milk. They're going to other things. And I have a theory about why that's occurring. But it is an interesting change right now. It's a shift and change where raw milk is definitely emerging for those that want to produce it properly.
Yeah, well, they're also going to Coke and Pepsi. And, the sales volume for those sugar drinks has exploded over the last 20 years. So
have the body mass indexes.
And so has the body mass index. That's right. So that's not a fallacious connection there. So yes, people are going to almond milk instead of dairy milk, cow milk a lot, but a lot of people are not drinking any of that. A lot of people are drinking Coke and Pepsi, and again, to our peril.
Yep.
So I love what you're saying, honestly, because one of the things that as the Real Organic Project has gotten into this, and of course we see the dairy crisis ongoing, and we will talk about that. But I go, well, it's really interesting that in vegetable farms where I come from, there mostly is a pretty strong connection to the fact that people eat what we grow, and often a very intimate connection. Often the people by name or by sight who eat the food that you grow. Yeah. And for dairy farms, even for small dairy farms, mostly that's not the case. And mostly the truck comes and the milk goes away.
You just put your finger right on it. When organic dairy was imagined under regulation by the USDA 30 years ago, there was never a concept about keeping it alive and well in terms of raw. The idea was it was going to be just going right into the same food chain, just keep it segregated from the conventional stuff and worry about the antibiotics and hormones and pastures, which has really kind of been ignored, unfortunately. But the bottom line is it went into the conventional food chain in terms of being processed. Your vegetables you're talking about are a living whole food that don't get further processed. They may be washed or bagged or something, but they're not processed. They're not irradiated. They're not pasteurized. They're not anything. They go in whole form directly to people. So you get that direct farm to consumer connection, which actually creates a different farmer because they're listening to consumers and hearing that feedback in the food chain back and forth between the mom or the dad, the family, and what they're eating and how great the kale is today, and the vegetables and the fruits and back and forth. That's a healthy, organic, literally a living relationship. With raw milk intended for pasteurization on the organic side, you don't have any of that. You put your finger right on it, Dave. And that's really missing the humanity part of not only organic, but also food. And what we're finding is those that embrace raw, using very high standards and testing and all that cool stuff, they get that back. Now think about this for a second from a humanity standpoint. You're a farmer, organic or conventional either way, doing dairy. You get paid like crap, and you never have anybody visit you and tell you that they love you. So you're basically isolated without love and no money. That's why we've got all-time high suicides going on with dairymen. It's insanity. It's all-time deprivation in terms of isolation and no money. I can't think of two worse elements to make you really feel bad. A raw milk dairyman has a mom coming up to him and having nice talks and saying how happy she is about her children's teeth and no cavities and how their immune systems are robust. And then they pay you a bunch of money for it. So you feel loved, you're well compensated, and guess what? You get feedback about what they liked or they didn't like about your product. And you're going to do those things that they like, not the things they didn't like. So it's a feedback loop to get better, and you're going to get paid to do better, and you get the love. You get the support in the relationship. Entirely diametrically opposed kinds of concepts. And I will say, I need to quote Mr. J.L. Rodale back in the 60s. He says, it's not organic to produce organic milk and then pasteurize it. That's a near quote, exact words, but that's what he said. And that's really a true statement because when you think about raw milk, it's the first food of life. It's breastfeeding. It's building an immune system. It's the structure. It's the signaling. It's all those things that are fantastically infinitesimally hard to understand about Mother Nature's million years of evolution for the first food of life. All that's destroyed in pasteurization, making it more allergenic and making it hard to digest. Well, raw milk has all the benefits of basically breastfeeding, except a couple. There's a couple that are missing there. But the bottom line is, raw milk's got a dark history. Yeah, 120 years ago, it killed a lot of people in certain conditions. It was horrendous. Typhoid, tuberculosis, waterborne problems, all kinds of stuff in downtown New York, Philadelphia. But when you went out in the countryside, the rolling grasslands with clean water and sunshine and grass, the cows healthy, that milk was going to the Mayo Clinic to heal people 120 years ago. So you have these complete divergent ideas and concepts and standards for what raw milk is, and now it's become very, very clear that pasteurization was a solution to filth. It really was a solution to filth. And it became very popular because you can make things really cheap, commoditize it, and not worry about quality. And we're living that reality right now where raw milk is a niche product. It's emerging, but people really, really, really get into it, love it because it has those incredible virtuistic values for the gut microbiome. And it's delicious. And we have the technologies now, and we have clean water, and we have the understanding of sanitation. You clean the udder off, you make sure that your somatic cell counts are low so you know there's no infection or mastitis inside the udder, and you get clean raw milk coming out. You chill it really quickly. You bottle it rapidly. You do some testing to make sure you're on track in a different standard, not the standard for pasteurization, but the standard for people. And you've got a fantastic product. And I'm really proud that Raw Milk Institute 12 years ago was established and actually has 2 peer-reviewed articles now on PubMed talking about when you do 3 things. You create good standards, you do farmer training, and you test once in a while, and what do you know? The risk of raw milk drops to near zero. Not zero, but darn close. And so that's in PubMed, the scientific Bible of the world, right, is PubMed, and it's undeniable. Nobody's refuting it. And it's interesting that the doctors out there are saying, breastfeed, breastfeed, breastfeed your babies. It's fantastic. The USDA is saying that in the dietary guidelines. Breastfeed, breastfeed, all these fantastic things that come through breastfeeding. That same list applies 95% to raw milk from cows, goats, sheep, horses, camels, reindeer for the last 10,000 years. So it's interesting how the other side's kind of gone quiet because raw milk's gotten safe with those that are really participating and doing a good job. And as soon as we keep it, as long as we keep raw milk safe and low risk, there's not a lot of resistance, because their big complaint is that it's unsafe. You fix that, and where's the challenge, right? The big challenge actually becomes a political challenge. The processors don't like to see raw milk because it takes their shelf life, shelf space, I should say. But in California, I mean, our raw milk made at Raw Farm is the number one selling fluid product in Sprout stores, number one, above pasteurized. And so that's kind of telling you where the dollar voting is coming from in terms of consumers saying, that's the kind of living whole food I want. But that's kind of being missed by the broader organic milk market, which has been basically it's triumphed by UHT, ultra high temperature pasteurized milk. So it's definitely an interesting place to be right now, Dave.
Okay, so boy, there's so much there. And
Yeah.
and I know we could talk for hours about raw milk and pasteurized milk. And I'm sure we'll talk more, but I want to touch back to the situation that we're all dealing with. Right now we have most milk in America, and I love to hear that you're doing so well. And we didn't say in the beginning, but you're in California.
We are.
Right? In what town? What part of California?
About 15 miles southwest of Fresno, California, which is kind of the dead center, north, south, east, west.
Yeah.
Kind of the agricultural food basket. Yeah.
Okay. So, and there you've developed, you're doing direct sales. Are you doing direct sales? You sell in stores, so you bottle and put in stores.
We make butter, cream, cheese, milk, kefir, and we sell it in 500 stores throughout California. We sell our cheese in 1,700 stores nationally, which is truly raw. And then we also sell in farmers markets directly to people. And we also sell directly on our farm store. But our biggest, about 98% of all the sales come through the stores where it's very popular. It's Sprout stores especially, but there's other stores.
Yeah, so you're a very energetic man. And so this is an interesting thing. I've been talking to a lot of dairy farmers lately, and we talk about direct sales and setting up a bottling plant. And I talked to Kevin Engelbert down in Nichols, New York, and you might know Kevin. He was on the NOSB for 5 years, and he was with Cornucopia Institute on their board. And Kevin said, we know that we're probably going to have to do our own bottling and set up a plant and become much more direct, local, regional in our marketing. And he said, my two boys now run the farm, and he said, they don't want to. We understand we might have to. They want to farm, and they don't want to talk to people. You're really good with people, but I'm not saying that they're not good with people, but they don't want to be dealing with people all day, every day. They want to work in the fields, milk the cows, the things that drew them to farming in the first place. And I found this to be a fairly common thing for a lot of dairy farmers. And I think that there should be a place in the world. You have an amazing blend of talents, right? To add to all the things of running a farm and all the maintenance of machinery and care for the animals and care for the soil and all of that, to add, oh yes, and you need to be a totally creative and innovative marketer and set up a whole infrastructure for bottling and delivering. It's a lot.
You look behind me here, it says you don't sell raw milk, you teach it. And that's because people, if they don't understand what raw milk is, why would they ever buy it? And so people don't like to be sold things like, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. No. We often teach about raw milk and never mention the word raw milk. We talk about the gut microbiome. We talk about the elements that make a strong immune system, innate as well as adaptive. And you go through this whole thing and you really get into the deep medicine and people are, well, what's that food? Well, it's whole natural food. It's whole unprocessed foods that bacteria like to eat to build the microbiome. And by the way, probably the champion of all that is the first food of life, raw milk. We all know that breast milk does that, but then what's the next step after that? Would it be a highly processed breast milk? No. It would be something like breast milk. So it all makes sense. So we teach it. And then people go, oh my God, I got to have this. And they taste it and it's done. They love it. It's delicious. Good, clean raw milk is absolutely delicious. Dirty milk, not so much. It has some issues. And pasteurized milk can have an off flavor. Some people don't like it. So you teach it, you don't sell it. And you're right, but there is some hope. I will say that there's a dairyman in Virginia. And he spent some time with Joel Salton. He spent some time with Ed Shank. He became a great mentor of Whole Foods. And interesting, he has a team. His wife is great on social platforms. His wife is great on social platforms. He's good with people too, but he's focused on the dairy side. So if you have a team and those kids, some of those kids really love social platforms. Some kids don't, but it takes a team to do raw milk. You don't do it by yourself unless you've got 1 or 2 cows, because you've got a big, long food chain to deal with. You don't stop at the milk tank. You go all the way to the consumer and into their belly, and back and forth. And so they have an 1,000 people, 1,000 families. That's more than 1,000 people. 1,000 families in a cow share operation where raw milk is technically illegal, thriving. And they're listed at Raw Milk Institute. But they have a team. And it's interesting that they're going to be way up there in terms of the money, very highly profitable and doing great. But they embrace food safety, and they embrace their consumer with a really good Facebook, Instagram, and social web system. That whole exchange. So I give a lot of credit to the wife, because you can produce all the raw milk in the world you want, but you can sell it to nobody unless you communicate.
That's right. So
it takes a whole person, and and I'm not saying those people aren't whole. They're great, hardworking, fantastically ethical, great people. But it's a missing element in terms of if you're going to sell directly to people, like the vegetable farmers you're talking about. It requires the human element. It really, really does. And if you don't have it, that doesn't mean you can't do it. It means maybe you need somebody else on your team that can do that.
Yeah.
So get people around you that can embrace people if you don't want to do it yourself. And you can go say hi and be gone and do your cow thing. But you need to have somebody that's going to listen to those people and satisfy their deeper need than just food. The people come with all kinds of problems, and your job is to listen to find out what those problems might be and offer a solution to them, because they'll pay you any price for that solution underneath it all. Charlotte Smith talks about this all the time, about how you market raw milk. You listen to people and you solve their challenges, whatever they might be. And raw milk may or may not be the challenge, but most of the time it is. When they're coming to you, they're talking about the fact they can't digest it, or it's allergenic, or there's a flavor issue, or something like that. And when you listen to people, you actually connect to the dollar voters and those that actually sustain you.
Okay, so you have hope, you have a solution, you have a path forward for a lot of dairy farmers. But let's go for a minute and talk about where the world of organic dairy farming is. So there's a problem there, and milk demand is low, but it's amazing. In the last 8 years, all the organic dairy farmers in Vermont have gone from being highly profitable to going out of business. And of course now Horizon says, guess what? We don't even want your milk at the dirt cheap price, right? So,
well, we can quote Tom Hanks when he said, "Houston, we have a problem." We do. And it started back in 2007, where Case Van Der Eyck down out of Pixley here and Aurora Organics out of Colorado basically started not pasturing their cows. And they had 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 cow dairies and not pasturing the cows.
And being certified as organic.
Yes, thank you. Which is a requirement. You pasture your cows. There's a whole pasture grazing 120 days per year, 30% dry matter requirement to do basic organic milk. Well, California shut down Case Van Der Eyck's dairy immediately in Pixley. Shut him down. Done. You're out. You're done. And he was no longer part of the organic milk market. But they went in and said, you don't have pastures, you're done. Aurora, they got a $7 million fine, and I don't know how many the counts, the civil liability counts that they had, maybe some criminal, I'm not sure, but they just hired better attorneys and paid the $7 million fine and kept on going. And where are they out today? They're now replicating that model, the mega CAFO dairy model, 5, 10, 15,000 cow dairies, because they're putting a couple cows out there in pasture, and they're dry cows. They're dry cows, not the milk cows. They do it seasonally, and they've got such a love affair and coochie-coochie relationship with their certifiers that they are breaking the law, but yet they get away with it. And unfortunately, the consumers not had that close enough relationship with the dairyman for hear the cries of the legitimate dairyman to come up to their rescue and say, I'm not buying that anymore from the Auroras and those, because they're not complying with the rule. They're not legitimately doing what they're supposed to do. And I'm going to reject that. So the distance between the farmer and the consumer has actually brought on the issue of the fact when the farmer cried, there was nobody to hear the tears or to hear the crying. And so these 89 dairies that literally are doing the legitimate job back east are now being shunned in lieu of 2 or 3 big mega CAFO dairies. When they cry, who's listening? Who's going to act on their behalf? So it's the people who own the brand are the ones that get the voice, they get the communication, and those dairymen don't own their own brand. So it's a real challenge. I think enforcement of the USDA rules, very, very important. I know you and I have worked both really hard on that, and we just can't get them to do a good job of that. And that's a real failure. That's why the Real Organic Project was born, was to let the consumer-farmer connection with the branding actually have some teeth, right? But it's a tough one when it comes to pasteurization and all that stuff. Let's say, you know what, there's always going to be pasteurization, there's always going to be a raw niche. Acknowledge that. That's fine. Now, how can these dairymen that are being shunned by the big processors get a legitimate market hold and be paid competently for compensated properly for their products on the pasteurized side? Well, that's a great question. It's a great question. It takes collaboration and unity amongst dairymen. Collaboration and unity amongst dairymen. Not amongst processors, amongst dairymen. The problem is, I've worked with dairymen. I'm the vice president of the California Dairy Campaign. I'm the only raw guy in the group. There's a couple of organic guys, but all of them are conventional. They have an extremely hard time ever doing anything in unity together. Because the big guys want the little guys to die off so they can be king of the hill. It's ridiculous. It's kind of a dog-eat-dog environment. And that was put together, that whole idea was get bigger, get out. It started back under Earl Butz in 1971 or 2 under Nixon, which was plant fence to fence and overproduce like crazy, get bigger, get out. Has been a get as many cows and produce as much milk as you can. And hey, it's even good if the milk price drops. That means the other guys die and I'll survive to the next roller coaster ride. So it's really this cannibalistic kind of concept. In the raw milk community, we really embrace teach. Build the market. There'll never be enough milk to serve all the people if we all do a good job of teaching. So we as individual farmers need to really promote and educate. And if we do, we'll be increasing consumers. And when we do increase the number of consumers and customers, when they move, they'll go to another area that has raw milk, and that raw milk farmer will benefit as well. So we need to be promoting and educating to build market and not be selfish saying, screw you, I'm going to be the only one that lives on earth after you die. And that's basically been the mantra on the conventional dog-eat-dog side, which is, in my opinion, tragic, because you need to have brothers and sisters working together. And when you break that apart, then, you divide and conquer. It's easy to kill off a market when you have divided forces. But the processors love throughput. They love throughput. If it happens to be bottled water that they make money on, great. If it happens to be bottled soy milk, great. It's our brand on bottled soy milk. Cows are kind of a hassle. So go to the big guys you can negotiate with to get the milk really, really cheap. Drive up with your big tank, fill the whole thing up, and never have to worry about running around the countryside to go to 30 farmers to get that milk tank full. Get it from one guy, and there you go. And so it's all been about the lack of transparency on the branding at the processor, which really causes a struggle on the other side.
Okay, so, and I want to go to that transparency issue. It's a big one. But first, I got a question for you. So, is it a simple fact that the big producers are simply more efficient, that they're better at it, that they are doing things cheaper because of scale? Or is there something that people are missing? Because, this becomes a conversation about a lot of things besides milk. And I'm curious, do you think Aurora are they better at making milk than you are? Like, why are they cheaper?
Oh, that's a great answer. Great question. I've got a good answer for you. The big operations, those guys are not milking cows. They're sitting with their CPAs behind a spreadsheet crunching numbers. They've got the lowest cost guys milking the cows. The minimum wage guys out there milking the cows. And they've got everything industrial, super efficient, buying large amounts of grain, buying large amounts of this at bargain prices. They have their own trucking companies. They're doing everything very efficiently. And yes, they can produce their milk cheaper than the guy who is actually milking the cows directly himself and doing the things himself. because his cost to break even is higher than minimum wage. And he's not doing a good job of managing his numbers. If you go to a lot of these dairymen, they may not even know what their cost per gallon of production is. I know what mine is. We have a key product indicator, KPIs. We really look at key performance indicators all the time to understand what's going on in terms of our cost that makes up the price that we go. What's our margin? And so the dairyman that's dairying versus managing has, in my opinion, a structural disadvantage, because he's literally not managing the numbers and the efficiencies and all that stuff. He's managing the cows, which is wonderful in terms of harmony with nature and his soul. But when it comes to actually efficiency in terms of this domination by mega CAFOs, it's a losing proposition. Now, there's a niche for those that are smaller. There's a niche for those that actually legitimately manage their cows in a sustainable way with pastures and all that stuff. There's a niche for that. And people want to have that versus the guy that sits around a computer. There is a real niche for that. The family value person versus the corporate value people. So
that niche,
that story's not being told.
That niche used to be organic.
That's right.
Right? So,
that's right.
So, okay, and you're saying, that it's not that they're doing the same thing better, it's that they're doing something different.
Correct. They're not pasturing. They're sending their calves off to be raised at calf ranches and bringing them back at 6-8 months and then converting them back to organic. So continuous change, evolution of continuous certification, which is not legal in my opinion, but they're getting away with it. They're taking advantage of a niche, a little loophole that they have for continuous certification of rotating their herd in organic from conventional organic. And they've got huge industrial size proportions that make things very efficient. They're not doing what the smaller guy does, which is got 100 cows, 75 cows, 200 cows with pastures and grazing and all those kinds of things going on at all with different milk values, at least on the raw side. Once you pasteurize it, I'm not sure what goes on there, but the bottom line is CLA values, omega-3 fatty acids, all those things are different with the cow that's producing maybe less milk per day, maybe 5 gallons versus the 10 or 8 that they're getting on the big CAFO. But they're not feeding all the grain. They're doing all those things. But it's a different operation. Unfortunately, the distinction's been blurred. The distinction's been blurred because of greenwashing. Greenwashing. You go to the website for Aurora, cows on green pastures all over the place. I'm sorry. You go to the cornucopia website and you look at the drone video and you actually, with the story, there is no pasture with the cows. Those are heifers. Those are non-milk cows. They don't have udders on them, okay? And they're doing that because that's the persona, that's the image that they want the people to think they've got, right?
Let me just, for people who don't have a dairy background, Mark, because people, I think, what was it? It was 10% or something of Americans thought that chocolate milk came from brown cows. So
chocolate milk.
Yeah. So people, let's say that, okay, people, just when you say heifers, that you're talking about younger cows who have not yet freshened, who have not yet started to produce a calf and produce milk.
Exactly.
And what age?
Not milk cows.
What age does a cow freshen? How old is she?
Roughly 24 months, which is 2 years.
Okay.
Plus or minus.
So
they get born, they get pregnant about, just over a year old, they get pregnant, and then they take some 9 months, and then they give birth, and then they become a milk cow. They go from a heifer to a cow.
And so before 2 years old, they could be out in a pasture far, far away, just roaming around. But once that the farm, the producer starts to milk them, they need to go to the milking parlor 2 times, or in Aurora's case, 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Right? So they need to be, this is where it's an interesting thing, because on vegetables, theoretically, you could have a 5,000 acre vegetable farm that was truly organic. There are questions about scale and impact on community, which could be positive on a large farm if the people were very enlightened. But for a dairy farm, and we've got farms being certified as organic that are 4,000 cows, 10,000 cows. For them, you literally can't do it. You can't get to the pasture and back to the milking parlor with that many concentrated animals feeding in an area.
Correct. And you one more step, the environmental footprint becomes pretty negative. It's no longer benefiting the environment with carbon sequestration and pasturing. Now you got a big freaking lagoon in the ground. You've got a big lagoon in the ground, Dave. You've got manure accumulation like crazy. You've got 10,000 cows eating and pooping right in the same spot. It's no longer an environmentally embraced kind of wonderful solution. You become part of the problem. So that's where that whole thing is just lost. It's just lost. It's just terrible.
Yeah. It's so far from the vision of what organic farming is intended to be.
Exactly.
So there's a tragic situation that grows out of that. And it's also a great opportunity, but I don't know how we're going to take advantage of it. And the tragedy is we've got these 89 farms and they're just the tip of the iceberg. It was just, okay, they all went out at once. How many organic farms have gone out of business in California in the last 5 years?
Half of them.
Half of them.
Yeah, it went from 130, 140 down to 60 or 70. Rough numbers. I don't know the exact number, but basically half.
Yeah. So this
and the ones that are remaining, they're having a heck of a time because their feed costs are high. Feed quality may not be that great. It's coming from 2 or 3 states away. Sometimes it's not local feed. They're having a real challenge. So feed costs, and then the prices are being pushed because you've got Aurora, just a couple bucks above conventional costs, or actually prices for milk. And literally it's a race to the bottom. Because what you've done is you've created an example that, well, if Aurora can do it, I can do it. Or I've got to do it or I'm going to be gone. So what kind of incentive for ethics is there?
Yeah. So let me be the devil's advocate for a minute. Let me be the Walmart shopper. And I say, you say that Aurora is not as good, but it's a lot cheaper. And I would like to get milk that's kind of organic. What's the difference between Aurora and conventional?
They're both pasteurized. They both, one could be pasteurized and the other one could be ultra high temperature pasteurized. I'm not a fan at all of ultra high temperature pasteurized because so much enzymatic and functional protein damage has been made. But you're trading gut life for shelf life. You got 90-day shelf life, but your gut's just shot. The differences between the two. Well, one's not using antibiotics or hormones. I'll give that credit. I'll give that credit to the Aurora side. Check to that. There may be some farm ethics stuff. I don't know. But I do know there's a lot of conventional dairymen that are very ethical and do a really good job producing their milk. And most of them are pretty good on the antibiotic side, but some of them abuse it. And there are some hormones still being used, the BST still being used on the conventional side. So those are the big differences. Other than that, you're not going to see a nutritional difference because you're not seeing the pasture side of what's going on there. And
let me jump in on that for a minute. So cows on pasture make different milk, nutritionally different milk from cows on grain. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and even more than that. When a cow's on pasture, guess what? Sunshine casts on pastures, not on steel buildings. Sunshine creates vitamin D. Unfortunately, vitamin D is destroyed in pasteurization. But the bottom line is those cows initially were producing vitamin D rich, omega-3 6 ratio good milk with CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, which is a good fat. So the profile of the milk is better and different. They're not going to make as much milk on a pasture because pasture's energy level is lower. So you're going to have to supplement that cow to get her energy up to be able to do what she's going to do. That's why you see supplementation with other things, maybe a little bit of corn or grain or hay or whatever, to get the milk up a little bit, but not much up. So you want to make most of your milk on pasture. That's a very sustainable practice because you're carbon sequestering. It's great for soils. The cows really like it. The cows last longer. They have a longer life. They don't actually they're not a racehorse anymore that's burning out. They're actually poking along for 10 years instead of burned out in 3.5 or 4. It's just a natural set of conditions, and it looks iconic. It looks beautiful to see a cow in a pasture, and she's happy.
Yeah. Okay, so you got a happy, healthy cow, and the cows are much healthier.
And you also have different bacteria. On our side of the fence, we always think about what's the cow laying down on in terms of making sure that her udder and her health and her udder. For the raw milk side, that's really important. On the pasteurized milk side, maybe a little bit important, maybe not so important because they're going to put it all in the tank and cook it. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so for an eater, they actually have a vested interest in this, that it matters, just the way as it matters whether you drink milk or Coca-Cola. It matters whether you're drinking milk that is well grown on pasture, from a cow that's getting a diverse diet and being outside and has the sun on her back every day. The tragedy is that we have actually a bunch of people who get that, and they want to buy that milk, and they think they are buying it. That they don't quite understand what's happening in the food chain. They don't understand what's happening in the processors, and they go to the store and they pay the money to get organic milk. And they're going, what a great deal. It's cheaper than it used to be. But it's not the same milk, is it?
No, it's not. And I think I've always liked the Real Organic Project in terms of differentiating and distinguishing the practices of the farm. We at the Raw Milk Institute do that a little bit too, because so if you're listed, we have your bacteria counts on a website. You'll visit and see what kind of quality of milk you're getting there. We teach people about that. The Real Organic Project can do the same thing and has done the same thing by saying, we're going to differentiate and distinguish this milk as coming from a smaller operation, pasture grazing, and the standards that you have, which are entirely different than that CAFO with God knows how many cows. So yes, that's a big thing. It's a big project, by the way. It's not an easy project, because for a brand to be real, you have to have consumers recognize it and choose it. And that's a tall thing. You have to have processors that are willing to put the brand on. They're willing to do the extra work. It may cost a little bit more. It's not going to be the dirt cheap stuff. And you're going to have to point fingers at people saying, we aren't like that. I hate being negative, but that's it becomes a comparison. So that's hard. We always like to be very positive and really support everyone. But at the same time, there's people cheating. There's people cheating straight up. And the bottom line is somebody's got to say that. I prefer a customer says that versus a farmer. But at the same time, somebody's got to say that and describe it and show the impact on the 7 dairies a day. Those aren't all organic, by the way. That's conventional too. But bottom line is lots of dairies being lost because of the loss of the police officers at the intersection. There's no policing going on at the USDA or the certifiers to assure you have a level playing field. They've completely ripped the playing field up, and there's no way to play anything on this field now.
Yeah. I always think of the old, cowboy movie, and the guy rides into town, and it's the evil mine owner runs the town, and the sheriff works for the mine owner.
Yes.
And the USDA is our sheriff. And they don't seem to be too inspired to enforce the law.
No, and you go back to the history of the organic, 2001 or 2 when Glickman signed off on it and everything. It was not embraced by conventional. They thought that was a huge threat. So if we don't mind the gate, if we're not really minding the gate and being guardians at the gate of the standards and making sure that we continue that, it'll get watered down over time. We've seen that. Because the conventional guys just don't want to see that challenge to them. It's a threat. This entire market is about market share, about SKU space on shelves, about relationships with stores that buy, and their margins too. They're always trying to get it cheaper so they can make more money. And it's been a great opportunity for organic, because organic means great things. Warm, fuzzy, wonderful. It's good for the planet. I'm helping, I'm nourishing, I'm doing all these great things for the soil, earthworms, cows, kids. It's a beautiful thing, but it's now being kidnapped by the greenwashers. They're saying, we're going to make money on this image that's been created. And that's what you're dealing with right now with that issue about how do we have the integrity remain intact with the farmers that are really doing it, but corporations have run off with the brand value.
Yeah. So do you think that Horizon has any obligation to those 89 farms? I'm just curious. It's, you could argue this either way, but so here they are. They're a large corporation owned by a larger corporation owned by Danone. And okay, they sent a letter saying, I'm so sorry, but you're probably going to go out of business. 10% of the organic dairy farms in Vermont, 20% of the organic dairy farms in Maine, 47 farms, I think it was, in New York. So is this just business? And it's like, well, that's the way the world works, and ultimately all ships are going to float higher because we're going to have cheaper milk, or are we not getting the world we want?
I think we're not getting the world we want. I really believe that in my soul. I believe that. Because money will destroy our world. When you look at greed as your only bottom line, money will destroy the world. It really, really will. Because people do terrible things for money. And corporate brand value, stock prices and things, there's all kinds of things happen to get that stock to go up. Hope and hype, hope and hype, hope and hype. Push it, you know, and then dump it later and get your money. And it's all about me versus we. And so, you know, everybody condemns the word socialist, but really doesn't look at what it means. It means socially co-responsible. All of Northern Europe uses those words and doesn't have a problem with that. But it embraces a different concept of competitive systems. And so, you know, I'm a mainstream, down the middle kind of guy, but I really embraced humanity and compassion and the greater good, and put that and made that part of our brand. That we're trying really hard to be the greater good for you and your gut and your kids and our cows and everything about the food chain, and just build a culture around that. Because people are paying $16 a gallon for our product at Sprouts. And the closest organic is Strauss at $8.99 a gallon. And then below that, you got prices way down below, down to $3 a gallon for conventional. So why are we number one and 4, 5, 10 times the price? You know, you wonder. It's because it brings real value to people. Their asthma gets better. Their allergies go away. They don't have a problem digesting it. It's delicious. And they bring that value. They're willing to go out and pay $5 for Starbucks, a cup of Starbucks. And they're willing to go to the doctor and spend money on antibiotics. But couldn't they shift their value system a little bit and say, I don't need the antibiotic because my probiotics are working and my gut's working and I don't get sick? You know, whole food nutrition. The gut microbiome is phenomenal science. It's not really embraced as much as it needs to be embraced in the medical schools, but it's getting there. Where people say, wait a minute on the antibiotics, we need to really prevent this through probiotics and whole food nutrition. And that the antibiotics are used sparingly and not very often, because it really has a destructive impact on your immune system and your ability to deal with the threats. So we have a real challenge, the money challenge, which is greed and me versus the need of we. And, you know, there's been a lot of this accusation, oh, you're a communist, you're a socialist, you're the labeling crap, which has really been very destructive and dark, where can't you just be a good Christian, a good soul, a good, you know, humanitarian, regardless of your faith? Just do good for your brother and feed him. And we've actually, interestingly enough, here we've had to embrace a culture of not talking about 10 different things ever. We don't ever talk about vaccination. We don't talk about abortion. We don't talk about gun rights. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. I mean, there's a long list, because guess what? We're feeding all, serving all, and loving all. And if you start talking about those divisive things, you start pissing off people. And let me tell you what, the influencers on the internet are, oh, it's ugly. They will eat you alive. If you identify one of those hot spots, you'll go crazy. So what we've done is backed up saying, we want to be good for all people. Take care of everyone. Love all, serve all, feed all, and just be really kind of just this big warm love. That's it. And don't really get into anything. If you want to get me drunk, I don't get drunk, but I mean, if you want to drink a little bit and talk about private stuff, if you're my friend, I'll spill my guts. But the bottom line is, we really have to back up and say the bandwidth of humanity is much larger, and take care of all faiths and all beliefs and all everything. And hopefully they'll come to better reason because their gut-brain link is working better. But really look at humanity more broadly. And those kinds of discussions you never see or hear on the pasteurized milk side, because they don't talk to people. They talk to a processor who's always trying to cheat them and give them less. So it's a different shift of mentality in ethics and morals and humanity when you start connecting to people and really realizing that compassion can solve most all issues by listening, understanding, and tone of voice. I know when I was a paramedic, we used to teach this class on compassion. How are you touching someone and listening to someone and being sensitive to someone and understanding and walking a mile in their moccasins or their shoes and understanding what kind of a hell day they've had and understanding why they're cussing at you and not ever take it personally, but realize that's their walk and just take them, accept them where they are. I've been able to really adapt that into my life here where you can say anything you want to me and I'm not really going to take it personally because it's your problem, not mine. And I will listen to it and try to figure out why it was triggering you. But the bottom line is that whole pathway of communication and touching and all that stuff is more of a we conversation and more of a humanity, compassion conversation than it is about me getting more and you getting less. So that appreciation for the entire food chain doing well, in my opinion, is grounded in the earth. It's grounded in the soil. It's grounded in the humanity of organics. It really is. But I think there's been a lot lost in that. When you say, screw everybody, I'm going to win. That really takes the whole wind out of the compassion of the soulfulness of being whole. You know what I mean?
I love what you're saying. I really do. So one of the things you said is one of the problems is that these companies are just looking at the single bottom line. And, that is the model of capitalism that we know in this country. And there's been an effort to create a different vision. It's called B Corp, the triple bottom line. And it's a beautiful idea. I've wondered,
great idea.
Can this work in a corporate world? And, and I think, unfortunately, the experiment we see is with Danone, which is the biggest B Corp in the world. And they get a very high rating from B Corp for their actions. Now, I will just to say that the guy who shepherded this through Danone got fired this spring, and they had an off quarter. And there was a stockholder group that objected, and they got rid of Emmanuel Faber. Do you think that we can bring what you were just talking about to a corporate world, to a corporation?
I found the innate component is people. It's the consumer. It's the mom with the kid. It's valuing their heart, their gut, their next generation, their fertility, their everything, listening to them when they say, I don't want GMO, I want cows on pasture, I want to know you, I want to visit you, I want organic real, I want to have my kids come see where food really comes from. That's a relationship thing. I think somehow we need to bring that closer to the farm. That's the one big element that's missing that brings in the tears and the joy of true compassion, true understanding, true connection to the farmer, and having the farmer's desperation become public desperation. Right now, if a farmer commits suicide, oh well, I don't know him. Nobody knows him. If everybody knew the farmer, he probably wouldn't commit suicide anyway, but bottom line is, the more socially integrated that farmer can become in the food chain and relevant in the food chain, important to the food chain, like your vegetable growers that sell face to face, or at least in some way they know each other, it becomes very, very important and vital. And I think that's the one thing missing when you make big distances between farmers and consumers and you put corporations in the middle who are just saying, we're going to make a bottom line for our customers, which are the investors and stockholders. Unfortunately, these stockholders are so big, these investment trusts are so big, that when you buy in with your 401k, you may very well be a customer of that farmer and don't know it. Because the benefit in your 401k going up had to do with how much that farmer got cheated in terms of the price going down. So there's all these backside problems with stock values going up because profitability went up because somebody got cheated or pushed down. The B Corp concept, I think it's great. But how is it done in execution in terms of the true validation of value going to the dirt, to the cow, to the people, to the green, to the farmer? I have kind of a bias towards the Canadian system, and I've been bashed for this, but I could care less. The Canadians actually have an interesting, very strict milk pool system where the farmers are part of a system where they can't produce more than what's required by the marketplace. But for that, they're assured a sustainable amount of money for their milk. Now, people have called that the socialist system. I call it smart and efficient because the one thing farmers can do is way overproduce and produce too much milk for the available market share because they don't know how much share there is because they don't know the consumer. I would never go out and put too much milk in the stores unless I knew it was going to sell. But these guys do it all the time. So knowing your customer and having a smarter design in terms of providing a sustainable price for a farmer and saying, but you don't need to produce more than that, produce that, and you'll get a really good sustainable price, should also apply for organics that are going to processors. And the processors, the organic farmers should be at the milk board saying, okay, processors, how much organic milk do you need this quarter or this year? And what's the price going to be? And have it be fair. And the processors actually get the milk they need from the locations they need, so their milk sheds actually are full versus having to move their processing plants because you just killed off their entire supply of milk. And you're not shipping milk for 1,000 miles with big carbon footprints. The Canadians have actually done a pretty good job of that. Not perfect, but a pretty good job. And you don't see dairymen losing their lives through suicide, and you also don't see oversupply versus demand. You see a balance there. There's some modeling there. I don't know that we have to have the exact system. We could have something different that encourages farmers to match supply with demand and put farmers more in charge in terms of that whole process so they aren't ignored as a pawn to be just dispensed with. I think that the organic on the processing side, I've done a little research on this. I know I've spent a lot of time in Canada, could fit quite well because you give a premium for them for their product. They have to have certain practices, but they sit at the table and they get a response. They get a certain payment for that, which is equitable. And the processors are not the ones that run the show. There's a balance between farmer power and processor power, and that's how that works. On the raw side, it's really quite different because the consumer has to be in balance with the producer. So you don't go out and produce a bunch of organic raw milk if you don't have a place to sell it. So you have to have a balance between the consumer and the farmer already. It's innately already in there. But when you've got the distance between the consumer and the farmer on the pasteurized milk side, you need to have some kind of a supply or growth management system to keep that equitable. And Canada, in my opinion, has done an excellent job of that.
Yeah.
It's a thought.
No, we need to look at better models because it's not working well now. And honestly, the many of the eaters who are looking for the milk can't get it, and they're starting to understand they can't get it, but it's not on the shelf. They just can't get it, right. Or it's mixed in, they can't find it. So, all right, we've just about had our hour here, Mark. Are there any thoughts? This has been great. Are there any thoughts that you would like to share that we haven't gotten to?
We've touched on a lot of things here today.
Yeah.
And Dave, thank you for inviting me out to talk about this stuff because I enjoy it. I think it's an important discussion to have. It really goes to the core of organic in my philosophy, which is a holistic approach to everybody in the food chain winning, including Mother Nature, Earth, and carbon sequestration and everything that we participate in as humans on our little spot out here in the Milky Way galaxy on Mother Nature's Earth. We really got to take care of our planet if we want to live and have the next generations be healthy. And the way to do that is nurse the soils, nurse the things that live in the soils, and you nurse the air and all the wonderful animals that are associated, and nourish us in our hearts, in our gut, and the whole thing is a holistic approach to how we live on this little space station we got here, and really the realization and appreciation of the fact that we cohabitate on a very small place we got to take care of called home is an important thing. I think that's a really key message. It's probably lost on most people because they just drive their cars and do their thing. But if we can think more globally, more holistically, think more about human health, think about how we can be best partners in the we environment versus me environment. I say this because I'm doing well. As a raw milk dairyman, I'm doing well. It's very hard for someone desperate to say what I'm saying because they're worried about extinction in their own place. But every raw milk dairyman I know is doing well. And so there's a message in that about consumer connection and being paid sustainably and adding value to your milk. What are they adding? Cleanliness and safety. Cleanliness and safety. They're taking responsibility for the milk at a different level, achieving a different product that people will want and thrive on. They're adding value to the milk that they would have not gotten value if they sent it to the pasteurizer. So there's so much on this that's being just now visited that's important in my world at least. And there's certainly a world on the pasteurized side for power to be returned back to the farmer in some way through some structural system to provide equitability there, which is absolutely critical. Or you're going to see in 20 years a bunch of 10,000 cow dairies all over the place, and some 25 cow thousand. We've got a 35,000 cow dairy already. Is that what we want for our future, with a terrible carbon footprint and terrible water and terrible air? No, that's not the way to take care of our world. So we're making dollar choices, and we're at a place now, kind of a crossroads, where these things are really, really coming to bear in terms of talking. And it's not an easy discussion, because those that are suffering the most have the least connection to consumers, at which they need to have come advocate for them.
Yeah. Mark McAfee, very well said. I'm glad we got to do this. So I always enjoy talking with you. I always learn a lot.
And me with you as well.
Good. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. We hope that you will subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a rating and review. A video version of this interview is found at realorganicproject.org/episode 72. Please join us next time when our guest is Jim Durst of Durst Organic Growers in Yolo County, California. He's a longtime grower who has decades of field trials under his belt, some with organic no-till. Durst Organic Farm was also part of the lawsuit against the USDA for the organic certification of soilless crop production, and he serves on the Real Organic Standards Board. To support this podcast and our certified farms, become a recurring donor at realorganicproject.org and get the benefits of being a real friend, including our book club where you can ask our favorite authors your questions. See you next time.